To order, this is the regular monthly meeting for January. The first item will be, I guess would be the roll call. Oh, you have one? Chris Berger.
Here.
David Connick.
Here.
I'm here. Jonathan Matthews.
Here.
Bill Anderson. Here. And Michelle Summers is here as the second administrator. Oh, and yes, welcome to our new county administrator. And you can introduce yourself real quick if you want. Just
Sure. Gary Curry. On the job for about a month now, almost.
Okay.
Still finding time to get around to meet and greet with everybody. And the opportunity to come tonight to watch you hold your meeting.
This will definitely be the highlight.
Highlight of the season.
Hopefully the shortest one you'll get to see.
And a quorum, how about that?
And a full quorum,
Yeah, a quorum.
fully attended. Okay, the next item is the,
We have more supervisors here than at any of the families.
is that on?
Because I don't see a red light.
It's not a red light.
It's
At least we don't see one. It's okay?
It's cool, okay.
Okay.
I didn't know we were supposed to be looking for a red light.
Okay, so this is the annual organizational meeting, and we have, actually, I don't see where we did the meeting calendar. Okay, so we're gonna do the election.
Didn't do that.
Is the meeting,
That's okay.
it is, okay. So we're gonna elect the officers and representative to the planning commission. And do you take over?
Sure.
Okay, Michelle's gonna take over the reading.
The planning commission.
Did I hear,
Yeah, so you say that all seats are vacated now.
all seats are vacated now. Is there any nominations for chair?
Don't we do the planning commission first? Which way do we do it?
Well,
We go up.
we
and down.
have done the chair and then.
Wait, I brought the rules, it says.
Can you tell us?
Yeah, I'm waiting. It says, election of officers after regularly held in blah, 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 the elected chair, vice chair, matter shall act in addition, shall nominate for the planning commission, so.
Doesn't matter.
So it's the chair,
I don't know how everybody wants this.
We can do the chair first, I guess.
We can do the chair first, then the chair can do the rest of
Yeah, that's what's happening for me. And I would like to say one thing about my position as chair. If I do get nominated, I still am willing to rotate out at any time. So if I do get nominated, that's fine, but I'm
well,
also.
in the past, we've been in positions some years and then we rotate out.
Are there any nominations for chairman?
They will just do away with the position.
I'd like to nominate
So you're second?
Second.
Who got nominated?
Alex.
Sorry?
Your motion to close nominations?
I move to close nomination.
Second?
I'm second.
Vote? Everybody in favor say aye.
Aye.
That was easy.
Congratulations, chairman.
Thank you.
Well voted on.
Okay, yeah, see, I can't get fired, I don't know what the problem is. But, okay, so do we want to do the vice chairman next? Is there a motion or a nomination for vice chairman?
Am I gonna do it all?
You could.
I'm gonna need Jennifer.
I'll second that. Is there any other nominations for vice chair?
I move the nominations be closed.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, all in favor of Jennifer as vice chairman? Jennifer Matthews? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
So
Okay,
who's gonna win?
all in.
Congratulations. I hate hair.
Now, as far as the secretary, and we have had Michelle in the past, or I don't know if we ever,
No.
we didn't
We're
officially,
zoning
I'm sorry,
administrator.
we didn't officially do that, right?
Correct.
Okay, so we really have been going kind of with David filling in
As a recording secretary.
as a recorder.
I was doing the minutes and she was doing that part.
Okay, so the question is, if we select a secretary from one of our members, so I would just throw out, are there any nominations?
I'm willing to keep on doing it.
as a recording secretary.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the secretary do with that, be at least, I mean, I have to say that I think the secretary should be a member of the board that also reviews the ads, because their name's supposed to be on it, and also is in charge of making sure that before that gets done, that everything's ready to be sent to the planning commission, and then that gets there. And so, anyways, I'm willing to do whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. If you want me to just do the minutes, I'll do that. If you want me to do all the other part, I'll do
But
that.
if we do have to fill that role,
Well, we do.
Chris, would you like to be secretary?
would you have an interest in it?
I don't feel that this is a thing that I am particularly good at. I'm not.
It's not one of your talents.
Computer literate. And,
We have, yeah, we do have computers now in this century.
Pardon me?
We do have computers now in this century.
Well, I've been struggling to get in the past century.
That's a real,
Okay. So do we do have nominations?
So it sounds like you're the perfect person for it.
I mean, basically,
You
okay.
don't want to do it. No one ever wants to do it.
I was, when I got on the Water and Sewer Authority, I was late for my first meeting. And
You got elected
when I
secretary.
arrived, I was the secretary. And I
They
was,
listen to you.
I was unable to shake that job. I don't know if Kieran took that from me, finally, after years of incompetence.
You weren't good at it.
And I wasn't very good at it, and I could never get fired, so. Is that a nomination
For who?
for you?
I don't know.
I nominate David Conner.
You want to second that?
all right, I'll second it.
Okay. Do we want to close the nomination? Is there a motion to do?
Close the nomination?
Is there a second to it? I'll second that. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Abstain.
Vote for David Connick as secretary.
Yeah, I
All in
finally won
favor?
something.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so the appointment to the planning commission, and Chris, you've done a great job at this for the last 3 years or so. I think it's been,
4 or 5.
No, it's
No.
maybe a little more than one.
No, you did it because I came on the board in January of 2015, and that's when you done it.
Okay.
Because Alex, that's when Alex became chairman, and he got off.
oh, I got off at that time, so that's been 3 years.
15, 16, and 17, you've been doing it 3 years.
Damn. How
I mean,
time flies.
So-
Time flies.
And we've had a rotating, even though it probably doesn't seem like it, but we have had a rotating sort of concept for that position as well as, and then I would include myself in that, although again, it's probably like the sewer authority secretary, hard to shake, but I feel like it would be a good time to rotate and just have a different representative, and that's no reflection at all on yours, in fact, greatly appreciated. But I was gonna nominate and suggest that David Connick be the representative to the planning commission. And I will say, I mean, everybody knows we've had differences of opinions over the years, but I value his knowledge, and I feel like he will have a contribution to be able to make. And I think it's worth giving him a shot, so that's why.
Thank you, Alex.
If there was
And
a
that's on
second-
tape too, that's on video.
Okay, yeah.
That's on
for-
video, yeah,
yeah,
so
we
it's
can
for a
definitely
record,
take it.
yeah.
And I just was, if there's a second,
I'll second.
okay, is there a motion to, or is there any other nominations? Is there a motion to close the nominations? Also, is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor of closing the nominations?
Aye.
Okay, everybody for David Connick for planning commission? I'll vote aye.
I'll vote aye.
Aye.
I will not vote aye.
Okay, so it's at a nay or just?
It's a nay.
Nay, okay. And you'll,
What's the score, 3-1?
3, 2, 1. You have a vote if you want.
I'll abstain.
Okay, okay. Okay, And then the next thing was the FOIA officer. And I don't know if you want to do all three jobs, or how everybody feels about who should be our FOIA officer.
Are we required to have a FOIA
Right,
officer?
every public body has to name them. So, you know, that's a new thing that just came in July, so, this past July, so.
A year ago, July? Or
This past July,
17?
July of 17.
Okay.
So, well, I don't know about the county administration, I mean, you're the FOIA officer for the county, and I don't know if you're willing to do it for the BZA or not, I mean, we have to make the designation, so.
Chris, do you have any interest in that?
I would be happy to do it. I don't know what is involved.
Okay, well, we can.
Pardon me?
You have to go to school, and you also are responsible for making sure all those notices go out on time.
So, that's in addition to the secretary.
I mean, it's similar to the secretary, I mean, so I'm happy to do that if you.
But Chris, if you feel that's.
I would be happy to do that, and if Mr. Connick could give me some advice and direction, that would be most.
The only question I have about it is, no matter who on the board does it, if it's going to be one of us, who, because it doesn't have to be one of us, but the question is, you have to either mail out or,
Well, can't he instruct Michelle to mail out or to do things like that? I mean,
I'm not even sure if Michelle does it, I think it's Lauren that does it.
well, through,
What are you mailing out, emails?
Like-
So those emails that have to go out?
the emails and the certified letters or whatever, you know, when there's neighbors involved.
No, that's not a FOIA thing, so that he doesn't, the secretary does
Does
that. Actually, if we're gonna publish, I assume we're gonna adopt a schedule, once we do that schedule, I don't think we have to do any other notices. That was the whole point.
Well, I thought
You
the
do the annual thing, but then you don't have to send out a notice of every meeting. We hadn't done.
I thought the FOIA was, what about the email notice? Don't people have the
You
right
do
to
that
request
this
it?
week,
Oh,
whoever's the
so
FOIA
this
officer
just sends
sends
out for the year?
sends out this
Okay.
whole schedule, and by the way, I don't think that the Board of Zoning Appeals can have any special meetings as such, because the code specifies how it's supposed to meet, and like planning commission, it says the planning commission has special meetings and how they're called and all that, and the Board of
I
Supervisors can
thought
have
it
special
did
meetings.
allow us to do something.
I checked it one time, somebody asked me, I
Okay.
guess we were proposing to have a special meeting, and somebody asked me that, and
Yeah,
I
I
looked it up.
proposed a special.
So, right, so I don't know I don't think you're allowed to have them anyway, so there aren't gonna be any meetings other than what's on the regular meetings.
But no, but you know, it
But we
says in
have
the code
rescheduled.
that there are occasions that you can have, the chair could call a special
No,
meeting.
it doesn't. In the zoning ordinance it does, but not in the state code. So therefore, whatever's in the zoning.
When did
ordinance
that
is in there.
change?
I don't know that it ever did change, honestly, I don't know, but
'Cause
it's
we
not in there
haven't-
now.
Yeah, it is in our ordinance.
It's in the ordinance, in the zoning ordinance, the local zoning ordinance, but it's not in the state code.
Well, but sometimes we have a change in meeting.
Well,
dates.
okay, if we have a change, then you're gonna have to do it, but mainly you're gonna send one notice in, like tomorrow. Send out this notice, and then if there's no other changes, that's it.
Just for example, this says the day after Christmas.
Well, we're gonna decide when we adopt it.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
We're still talking about who wants to be
Okay,
FOIA.
so if you're interested and feel like that's, I mean, we'd love,
Okay, I'd be
I think
happy.
that'd be great, okay.
You're also the person that the letters, if they wanna see correspondence or files, they're gonna write to you. It's all gonna come.
Well,
to you.
they're gonna write to the FOIA officer, and then she's gonna call him and say,
Well, he's,
He's
will
it.
be.
They're gonna write to
I
you.
know, but you don't put someone's name on it,
Just
just
wanna
put
make
the
sure you know what you're
position.
getting into. I mean, I don't think we've had any FOIA requests, but.
And we'll just play it straight, won't have to
Well,
worry
what
about
if you have a question?
it. Okay,
I'm in the book.
I'm sure.
All
okay.
right.
So,
Is he nominated?
I don't know,
or
did
what?
I nominate? I'll nominate you
I'll
if you
second it.
like. Is there any other nomination
No,
for FOIA officer?
I mean that we close nominations.
Okay, is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of closing the nominations? Aye. Aye. Okay, all in favor of Chris Bird for FOIA officer?
Aye.
Okay, well, thank you.
I understand.
Oh, you abstain, okay.
All right.
Okay, now the next thing, I guess, the meeting schedule, and we have a meeting schedule here. And I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's the fourth Wednesday of each month at 7 o'clock PM. I think it says all that.
Yep.
Okay. Now, the basic idea is if we adopt this now, then this is gonna get posted, and then this is gonna
On
be,
every public bulletin board in the county.
well, it's two, right? It's one outside the administrator's office, or the, whatever your office is, and then the
One downstairs.
courthouse.
Today's the third Wednesday, January.
It's
No,
the
we're
fourth.
the fourth. This is the fourth.
Oh, it is?
It is, yeah. Because either, yeah.
Where are you living, I can get around? Maybe they're a little slow.
Yeah. Somebody wanted to write a contract with me the other day and put the 30th of February on it. So, I don't know what that meant, but, no, I didn't do it. I was pretty quick on it. So.
Maybe they're just testing.
Okay, now the other thing is it does show the 26th of December, and do we have any thoughts on that?
Oh, I see.
And I will say.
Who's got a calendar, but, because what's,
Here's the calendar.
should be something.
What kind of phone is that? Oh, that's good.
Well, it's either
So
then
we
or
could-
move it back. Let's move it back, if that's okay with everybody, to the
The
19th.
30th? Well, the planning commission meets that day.
Oh, yeah.
What we've done
About
before
the
is we
20th.
met on the
Yeah,
day,
20th.
on the Thursday after the planning
All
commission.
right, so that would be the 20th.
So Thursday, the 20th?
Thursday, the 20th.
Yep.
Okay, with that change, and then this leaves us the ability, we can, if we don't have an item coming up, we cancel the meeting. If we have a scheduling conflict, we can still reschedule, but we'll have to notice. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think if we're gonna do that, then at the top, right under the title where it says BZA meets the fourth Wednesday of each month at 7 PM, we have to put parens except December.
And, well, let's
Close
see,
paren.
we also have to look at November. But that
Well,
is,
that's the Wednesday after Thanksgiving this year, I've checked that.
Or we could
no, it's
say,
not.
we could say as a general rule.
Well, that's more words.
Yeah, okay, whichever, because we
You
might.
sure? I don't know, I thought I checked.
So,
It's the fifth,
thanks, this doesn't show me Thanksgiving. So is it Thanksgiving the 22nd,
Yes.
the 4th? Okay.
And
So
this
that's the
is,
5th, well, maybe you better put except November and December.
Well, the 28th is the third, is the
Fifth.
Wednesday after.
It's the 5th Thursday.
No, it's not. It's the 4th.
no, because it's the 28th, if it was the 29th. it was
Isn't
the
that when
5th.
Thanksgiving is, almost the 4th Thursday?
Fourth Thursday.
Or- Is that right?
Let's see the calendar.
But we're on a Wednesday.
There's, Thanksgiving is the 4th Thursday.
See, by
Okay,
starting,
Wednesday, okay, one.
by starting on
Moved.
the 8th or the
I
7th,
touched it by accident.
it doesn't,
So here's the
that would
28th.
mean the first Wednesday was on the 7th.
Mm.
So that would throw it,
So when are we gonna do it?
uh,
The previous?
can we just do it when this says?
The 28th.
When
That's
is,
the fourth Wednesday, I assume.
is that the day before Thanksgiving?
No, it's the week, it's 6 days after Thanksgiving.
Yes, the week after Thanksgiving.
How could that be?
Well, because the fourth, the
It's
first,
blue February.
no, it's because,
What?
it's because Wednesday happens to fall on the last day of the possible
Oh.
one, which is let me see, which is the 7th.
Got me.
Okay, so we'll leave it alone.
Not the night before Thanksgiving.
So we'll leave it alone.
Great.
Okay.
Leave it alone.
Do we have a motion to approve this,
I move to approve it as amended, Mr. Chairman.
is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion otherwise?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Yeah.
Adoption of the agenda, which I guess we're about halfway through. so.
I move we adopt the agenda.
Okay, the question, the Dodd appeal,
That needs to be
Well, we
stricken from
speak-
the agenda.
Well, I mean, we need to talk about it because we need to designate the acting secretary according to the rules, so we still need to talk about it even though I'm not going to hear it. I mean,
Needs to be taken off the agenda.
why?
well, hold on a second. It's not really, it hasn't been advertised.
It doesn't need to be advertised, we're not having a hearing. We're not having a hearing tonight, we're just going to designate the acting secretary to put out
So
a
the
hearing
que-
notice.
okay, so here's the question, we could just do this right now.
Look, wait a minute, read the rules, what they say. When you have this, an appeal, which is me, The zoning administrator shall not act as secretary in cases of appeals of his decision. We need to fix that.
They're not acting.
The board, no, it says his. The board shall designate one of its members to act as secretary for the purpose of documenting the matter under appeal or shall retain the services of a court reporter.
Now,
And
is
then
it?
blah, 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 and that's Rule 2E. So we have to designate, Michelle's disqualified from acting as secretary, as doing any ads.
Why don't we just go ahead and skip to this? We'll adopt the agenda. What I'd like to do is go ahead and just do this first.
Okay.
That way, if there's anybody waiting around for this, then.
All right.
Now, there is some issue of.
We adopted the agenda?
Well, let's adopt the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda without
I moved that,
changing?
yeah.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Good, now what do we have to do?
Okay. So if we adjusted the time of the order, well, I just did. I thought I included that. Okay.
Sorry.
Well, anyway. Okay, so the question is then, I mean, there is an issue of your ability to do that, correct?
Do what?
Because this relates to the Dodds and you have a conflict.
I don't, I actually got an opinion from Mr. Goff, and Mr. Goff says I don't have a conflict.
On this particular one, even though I
That's
said you did before.
That's right.
What was the difference?
The difference is, this isn't an application, this is an appeal to zoning administrator's decision of the interpretation of the zoning ordinance, and therefore, it's a matter of general public interest, not of any particular interest, and that's what he opined, so.
Do you have a copy of that with you? by
I
chance?
didn't bring it, but I
Oh.
have it in email, and I'll circulate it if you want. Because I anticipated that I was gonna have to recuse myself, and I talked to him the other night about it, and he said, write me a letter and I'll write you back, and he did. Yesterday.
Interesting, even though it's that personal to that.
Because there's an exception in the rule that if it's a matter that pertains to general public interest, then it's not a conflict. Then, or it could be a conflict, but it's an exception to the rule that requires recusal. That's what he said.
The recusal is not required.
Right. So actually, I forgot that Michelle's actually not the secretary anymore than I am.
Right.
So then we don't have to do that, because I'm already secretary. So the question is, are we gonna hear it next month? And then I'll do the end.
Well, I mean, we almost have to do it
Yes.
next one.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you don't do
Well, I
it in
mean,
90
we-
days,
When was-
Will Goff and you be working together on the appeal?
Yes, sir.
When was the application, when was the appeal actually made?
December.
I mean, there's a date there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
What is that?
December
date?
17th or 18th, something like that.
yeah, somewhere in there.
Is it, okay, because we have 90 days.
Maybe 15 or something, the 15th. So we're well within that.
But we have 90 days from that point
Yeah,
that
so
we have to
so
render
that'd
an
be January,
opinion.
February, we have till March 15th, I think, that we have to do something.
And
So
so if we
if we do
did
it in
the
February,
28th of February, but we would have to either make a decision then, or we could, I guess, defer it. to
If they
an
agree, I'm
extended
not,
meeting.
I guess, I don't see why we wouldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, you gonna be ready?
Yeah. I-
And so we'll just make sure that the advertisement is.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm doing it, so I'll do it.
Okay,
Next month.
okay, so I guess we're
All right, I'll get,
on board. So that doesn't require,
no, I guess we don't have to, now
Okay.
that one of the members of the board is the secretary, just as the zoning administrator can't be the secretary. And the rules say that, because at that time, the zoning administrator
okay.
was the secretary.
Okay, so the next item is going to be the minutes.
Yep. I circulated them last, I don't know, Wednesday or
Let's see,
Thursday.
where's my copy? Oh, there was one misspelling, I think, of Mr. Anderson's middle initial.
Oh,
And my middle initial is H.
So there's two, Jennifer H. Matthews, which is not, I mean, of some importance. And then
I'll
Will,
fix it, I just.
is it L Anderson?
So, yeah.
WL, okay, so L Anderson. Okay.
All right, that's it.
See, isn't that great?
I spelled draft right this time. I
It's
left
not Dr. Fast.
Where is draft? I missed it.
Took it off.
It's a 4-letter word.
It's 5.
Oh, okay, 5 letters. There we go.
Mr. Chairman, The minutes we reviewed at the last meeting, the changes, the corrections were made and put back on board docs.
So wasn't it just, oh, okay, but it was just the one that had the substantive corrections, correct? You remember? Okay.
It's a corrected.
They were corrected. Okay, so, yeah, so shall we just as a blanket approve all of the?
There it is. See, it says
Yes, I
recommended.
see, it does have 5 letters in it. Okay,
Spelled right.
okay.
So with those 2 corrections, I move the minutes be adopted.
The minutes of the 28th of December
Right.
be adopted,
Adopted as
circulated.
corrected. As correct.
Except
Oh, those are just
those 2
typos.
corrections of the initials.
Okay,
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Now, for the other minutes, we approved all of them except the one, and now I did not bring a copy of that one. Do you remember which meeting that was?
Yeah.
Because we had a whole stack of old minutes.
When March that's in the minutes, it says what we all did.
Oh, it is in the minutes, okay.
So look at those
Maybe
minutes.
all I have to do is look.
It was the August 24th.
Oh, okay, that was the one that had all the changes in it.
That was a blending of 2.
Okay, well, since I'm ashamed to say I did not review this, I think we probably be better to kick this to the next meeting. We'll approve all the other ones. Because I really,
Which one is that?
August 24th
Of this year?
of 2016.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'd say let's just put that one on. Okay.
Oh, that's the one that's sort of the melded one of.
Yeah, and we'll just do that, because I'm not going to review this right now.
Okay.
And I didn't, so. Okay, so is there a motion to approve all the other minutes that were submitted?
So moved. Except
for
August,
which we'll just put on the agenda.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Is there any further discussion? So all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the last item now is the application forms. And we were provided with a copy of a special use permit application and the process for variance application. And was there a process for special
Believe
use?
it or not,
permit?
do you have an extra copy?
I don't know, maybe. Let's see what I have there.
It was just these 2. There's a special exception goes to the board.
That's the special use
Was that
permit.
passed? Or are you still under
There
discussion?
was
Still under review.
variance. I don't know if there was.
This is a copy of what we currently were working with.
Well,
Right.
maybe I didn't print this out. Okay, so, and this was all on board docs?
Yeah, I saw this.
Okay. So what are we proposing to do with these?
Well, I don't know, I mean, I think we're gonna talk about it. I think that, which one do you want to do first?
Let's do the special use permit, I guess, that's the most prevalent one. Oh, there's that.
Well, I think what's lacking in this, and what oftentimes is the problem when these have gone to the planning commission, and this form's like as good as, it's okay, as good as it goes, but when you get down to proposed use of the property in accordance with, I think there needs to be some
That's supposed to be
there's gotta be a big
category.
blank, or there's gotta be a place, in other words, let's say it's a family apartment. That's where the person, or the applicant, has to go through each one of those requirements that are in the,
You're talking
special
about the
conditions.
standards?
Well, like it's gotta be 200 feet, so it has to say
You
distance
want
from
to
the
enumerate
principal
those
thing.
out, so you want those
Square
things.
feet, and all that stuff that you need, and only really the zoning administrator can guide them through what has to be in that, because depending on what they're applying for, if they're applying for a family apartment, there's one bunch of standards. If they're applying for a tourist home, there's another. Then there might be things like, if it's a tourist home, what months of the year you're gonna operate, or what's the maximum occupancy, and so there's a sort of different bunch of conditions that apply to each one, and I think there just has to be something like attach a separate page that goes through the things.
If it's for a boarding house, tourist house,
Or
X.
if it's for a gas station, how many pumps are you gonna have, or if it's for what, nuclear waste dump,
So we wouldn't have a form for that, it would just be something.
Well, you're gonna have to have a reference and have an attachment
So
to
it's
it
Checklist.
Okay.
Just
that
for
goes
those.
through all the stuff, that's one thing. The next thing is that, well, with whatever section it is, that's what guides them to that. The next thing that's not on here, and I guess it should be a couple of things that are if applicable, is one is health department approval. If it's a tourist home, if it's a second dwelling on a lot, if it's a restaurant, if it's something that needs,
If you look on the
It says
checklist page,
approval by local health department.
I know that's on there, but it's not on here. It's not on the application form for them to check
you
out.
have to sign that, just to submit with the application.
Oh, I see what you're saying. And the highway department, same thing. Do they
Because
need
it's-
an entrance permit? Is that on?
It's got that in there, it says property lines abutting streets, location of existing buildings, highway entrances, driveways, parking, photos, and then approval of VDOT and the health department.
This is.
Special use, yeah.
Yeah.
I see that. No, that's process. I don't see, oh,
What do you mean
checklist,
with the-
I got it, it's on the back. Okay, so you got it on the checklist. Okay,
I do
see.
have a question there about procedure, just in general. Is it ever, because we have done this in the past, where you granted a permit subject to getting health department approval?
Mhm.
Now, is there, because sometimes, health department approval requires getting a larger drain field approved, or something that someone would have to go to considerable expense that would not be required if they didn't get the permit.
Mhm.
And so I'm just, as a matter of procedure, is that not a reasonable
Well, that would,
to sometimes?
wouldn't that come with their permit or with their condition that Nedge would send over?
Well, so,
You're,
but they-
you're sort of, I see what you're saying, but on the other side of it, let's say it's a health department issue. And.
You mean that particular?
That
like there's
particular,
a-
whatever-
You
well,
mean there's a problem?
No,
because
let's
of
just
the-
say let's say somebody's gonna build a building for a tourist home or a B&B.
Or anything.
That's not there now, it's just they got a lot and they wanna build it. Well, part of it is how big, well, I'd say two things, and one is speaking as a former zoning administrator. I tell the people, go to the health department, tell them what you wanna do, because if you don't get that, there's no point in you paying $450 to go to all these hearings, only to find out at the end, either A, it
But she
doesn't
would
work.
be telling them that.
Well, she should be, I agree, but in other words, if they've already done that and gotten the approval, then it should be there. And second, for the planning commission or us to consider, personally, I'm not a proponent of approving things subject to somebody else, like the highway department or health department saying it's okay, because to me, that's the issue before the Board of Zoning Appeals or the planning commission, either one. How can we make a determination that complies with the ordinance and it complies with the whatever the conditions are, if we don't know, maybe they have to put in some pumping station, and maybe the neighbors don't want to, they wouldn't object to a drain field, but maybe it's got rocks, so they have to put the drain field in some crazy place. And this and that, I don't know, there's all manner of variables, and I agree, it sometimes
So we
involves
could-
an expense, but I don't think, when you approve it subject to, I'll tell you, the highway department feels like, when the Board of Supervisors or this board approves a special use permit, subject to the highway department approving the entrance, they always say, well, I guess they want us to approve it, and then they go approve it, whether it really should be approved that way or not. And it's, so to me, to get an objective, view, is this a safe entrance, is this okay? Make them come in and do it, that's part of the process. And if they haven't done that, how can we make a determination it's not going to create a traffic jam?
It seems that we've always had those things have always been in front of us when they've come in and they've
Well,
had,
not the health department.
no,
Not
but that they've
always.
had the
Not
almost
hardly,
always,
hardly.
with the VDOT, they show us how that there's only one entrance or they can't do this or that. So
Well, you can do that, but sometimes the health
Well,
department,
Alex, I think your question is a very good one. Is that the only condition that
well, yeah,
would
because there's,
require a significant?
well, there's some
Expenditure?
aspect, for example, it could cost a couple $1,000s to verify a drain field site on land that's obviously fine for it. But if you have to have final approval, you have to have a soil scientist go out, you have to have, you know, that
Jack
type of
Lockhart
thing.
just gone? Did the
Well,
whole
Jack
thing?
Lockhart is gone, unfortunately.
He is?
Yeah. So, I mean,
Lockhart died.
but no, I mean,
Long ago.
but now when you do it, I mean, it's getting a soil scientist, getting a study, you know, paying $700 or whatever it is to the health department. I mean, it's substantial. And so if they're not gonna get the permit, why make them go through all that trouble?
I agree.
That's my point. I
But
mean,
this
that's my,
this permit now costs $400 or $500, so why make them get this permit if they're not gonna get that?
I guess.
Well, it's been-
That's peanuts compared to what they would pay to get the health permit though. And I've never seen VDOT give a hoot about what the county thought, quite frankly.
But I mean, okay, so in other words, if there's a thing like you might say, well, subject to the building inspector approving the building after it's completed,
Well,
That's a
that's
given.
his bailiwick.
but that's a given, health department's a given,
And the VDOT.
highway department's a given. So I would just propose that it doesn't have to be a final health department permit or
All right.
approval.
Well,
It had to be-
But so that would have to be addressed, is what I'm saying, but not necessarily completed.
Well,
So
I
maybe
guess
letter-
I'm still concerned. I mean, I don't know how you make findings that we have to make sometimes when you don't know that stuff.
And
I mean,
my-
and the highway department, do they charge?
Yeah,
if you need a
They do?
permit,
yeah.
it depends, it depends. I mean,
I thought they just sent the guy out and he said, yeah. looks like-
well, if you need a new entrance permit, there's a cost, right, and there's a substantial rate sometimes.
There's a substantial weight for all of what you're talking about, health department.
And so, and all that I'm saying is, it's not whether or not we decide it
Yeah.
fits, it's the health department who would decide. And so if they don't get that approval, the permit doesn't happen.
All right,
So-
well, I don't know,
So that's just, so I'm just saying that if you have maybe a preliminary letter from the health department, or, you know, something of that nature, I just don't think you need this final approval.
okay, I'm
That's-
okay
that's
with
my
that, but
point.
some kind of preliminary something.
Yeah, okay.
Because I honestly, I guess I still think Jack Lockhart is the health guy. So obviously, I'm a little.
And it was a lot
How does it-
easier, but it's gotten a lot more expensive now, and which
You're
is to
asking
go.
people to put out a great deal of money to go before a board to find out that they don't want it there.
And then that could even force us to feel like we have to approve it because they've already spent $2,000, you know.
And I wouldn't have.
It might not affect some of us, but, you know. Okay, well, anyway.
All right,
With
before we
that
get, wait a
caveat,
minute,
yeah.
before we get too much further, and I guess here's what I want everybody to look at for a minute. If you brought your zoning ordinance,
I did.
good, I knew you would. Site plans, Article XI 14. So I've always had this question and never had it really satisfactorily answered. Because, and when I.
Which section is it?
121, 171, 171. You know, the
Okay.
chart of the permitted uses, which is 170-36.
121. Way back.
But 121 says, no zoning permit for any use for which an X appears in the site plan column of Article 4, that's 170 whatever I just said, 36, shall be issued unless and until a site plan shall have been submitted and approved in accordance with the provisions of this article. Now, the way I understand it, because you talk about a big expense, if you look down at the submission requirements in section 122, the next one, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 14, you gotta have like an engineering study. And only the planning commission can waive it. Now, the question is, do they get to get the site plan approved by the planning commission before we act or after? Because it doesn't say, it says no zoning permit for any use for which an X appears shall be issued. So who issues it? We issue it, I think, or do we
Well,
approve it and the zoning
They
administrator?
issue it.
Well,
Yes,
then,
they
then
issue it.
before it gets issued, they have to come in with a site plan too. And really, that's something that we haven't, not we, but the
So-
county hasn't followed.
So we would approve a permit, but it would not be issued until
Until the
everything's
site
in
plan,
order.
and they're supposed, if there's an X in that column, then once they get the approval from us, then they gotta go get that detailed engineering thing with everything in 1 through
Right.
14 done, and take it back to the planning commission.
Which again fits in with the idea of
And
not,
then, and only after them, do they get that approved by the planning, or what the planning commission's been doing a lot of times, is when somebody brings the application before we get it, they say, where's your site plan? And they have some piece of paper with, a sketch
Well,
on
but it
it.
depends, and it gives you qualifications in here. A site plan will not be required for the repair or rehabilitation of an existing structure, and it goes on with some of those things. So sometimes you don't need it, and just a plat will do.
Right, but sometimes you do need it, and the question is, need it when? Because we had one like, taking Dr. Singh, she came in here with a thing and she didn't have a site plan yet.
She had an existing
Well, she had
building.
this kind of a sketch.
prior,
But-
certainly prior to it being issued.
It didn't meet all these requirements, I don't think, and that would have cost thousands of dollars. And again, you have the same issue that Alex
Yeah.
properly raises, but why put somebody to that expense if it's not gonna be approved? If all the neighbors hate it and they think it's gonna be too noisy and all that, why do they have to do it? So, but I think it needs to be clarified in 121 that first they get their basic general approval from us, and then they make up this detailed site plan, not a sketch,
Yeah.
and then they take that back to the planning commission, who blesses it, and then the zoning administrator
Issues
issues
the permit.
the actual permit, and this is just a little vague.
It is vague, and
And so, well, maybe I'll recommend
the
that.
clarity should come from the Board of Supervisors, or.
Well, they're gonna clean up some of this. There's something floating around, and honestly, I can't remember what it says, but I did some work, and that's one of the things that's pending to come up to the planning commission before, on a
But
public hearing.
if this
That
could be
clarifies it.
bulleted out, so do A, then do B, then do C.
Right.
Under
Because-
general circumstances, because there's always gonna be one little.
All right,
I
so
think-
it says something like that they can have just a
But it
sketch.
also says the zoning administrator may waive any or all of these requirements when, in his or her judgment, the submission is not
I
necessary.
think she needs the planning commissioner blessing.
To bless it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we have seen in other localities that the special use permit is essentially aligning the use with the site, similar to whether it be by right. The zoning permit is a distinct process and would follow that. You need a zoning permit for any action that you do, once you know that it's a permitted use. So prior to getting a zoning permit and following up with a building permit, that's when the site plan would be required. So I haven't looked into the definitions of zoning permit relative to special use in this ordinance, but that may be theory.
Well, I think you're
To
correct, but
clarify.
I think that's sort of what it says, but that's not what they've been doing. They've been sometimes they make people come in with a detailed site plan at the planning commission before we even hear it, or before the board of supervisors hears it, instead of some kind of preliminary,
I think if
general
it's-
thing, and so that's a big impediment to people to apply.
I think if it's preliminary enough to understand what they're planning to do, then the final thing, which
Okay.
would involve.
Well, I think the amendment that's been pending for some time
You think
helps
it
clear
does
that.
address it? Okay.
I mean,
Do we need to make any type of recommendation?
Well, I mean, I guess the question is there some sketch we have on here, we're back to this form, so the question is the plat, is that attached, and it's with a copy of the deed to the property?
Because someone could,
Scale drawing, that's it, okay,
someone can generate a scale drawing by hand.
okay, yeah, well, they can just
That's
take
what-
their old plat.
Yeah,
All right,
does that answer?
with that,
it?
I'm okay with it.
So that's the special use for the
Yeah.
application?
So
Okay.
some of it is, most of it's in here, and then to have secondary pages for
Right,
special
the more
exceptions
detailed
with
description
All the
of the.
requirements.
with the footage setback and all of that. And that sounds like a good idea, and I think that's one of the things we have recommended is to have that, so they can go, yes, 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 no, yes.
All right, on the variance one, are we ready to do that?
Sure, yeah, let's go
All
ahead.
right. Oh, one other thing, I don't know, some of these ones I saw,
This
well, I
is
guess I'll be doing the ad, so
process.
I'll clean it up, but some of the ads or some of the applications still had that ex parte stuff on the special use permit, so.
But it should be on the
Should-
variance.
But it should be on the variance,
Is
okay,
it
fine,
on
no.
Okay.
But the other thing is that's missing from this variance application is although it's in the process form,
The process.
if you meet the following criteria, what's wrong with this, in my view, well, it's on the checklist, but I think it ought to be part of the application itself, all the four questions. Why the strict application would produce hardship? Why the hardship isn't shared by the other properties? Why the authorization will not be of detriment, and the conditioner, and why or how it's not, recurring. Those four things need to be on the blank, because
But
they.
is
so they-
this checklist part of the application?
That would be a separate attachment to the application.
So this is something that the applicant would make their
Yeah,
case.
right. Well, they have to say what it is.
Yeah.
Because I think,
And then we have to
frankly,
check
a lot of these
some
variances, I'm
dimensions,
just trying to
why
see
he
where's
do
this
it.
checklist.
And then he wants to
Keep
go.
turning this
Did you
over.
have a checklist on?
or
Well, it
he
just
would
says
say
checklist, why or how, all right.
what their argument is of why they're in the hardship. Is that what you're saying? Is it that you want them to write out why they're in the hardship?
Yeah. Okay, a
On
statement
this
of, you got a
application.
mistake here, by the way, on the third one, it said you left the T off sought.
So who are you talking to, Michelle?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Why or how it would produce undue hardship relating to the property? Well, okay. I think there ought to be another question. Was the hardship self-created? Well, no, I'll tell you what the other counties, they ask them that. Because you'd be surprised when they start trying to fill this out, if they can't figure it out, or if they can't answer those questions, then they shouldn't get a variance. And then they don't have to spend $400. It's better to have them go through their process of figuring it out before they get up here and we break the sad news to them that you built this building too close to the line and that's a self-inflicted hardship, so too bad, too sad.
I can add that.
Huh?
I can add that.
Or like, when was the building, is the building existing or not? Or something like that, because that's sort of an issue. And what I'm trying to get at is, sometimes I've seen here some applications that obviously are not going to get passed, and because they don't meet the criteria. And if they would have filled out the application and had to explain that on there, they would have realized, guess what, we're not going to get it, so maybe we shouldn't bother applying. And so that's what I'm trying to avoid, so that we don't spend money unnecessarily, and plus we don't have to go to the time and expense and the whatever of getting ready for a meeting that's obviously not going to pay it. So it's a very strict test.
Authorize a 10% variance on the setback. Or so.
Yeah, okay. I think that, it sounds like she's gonna add that.
Okay, with that,
Shall we just, we'll revisit this next time with these
Okay.
changes? And
Administrative remote.
Michelle,
Do we have anybody that's gonna be coming forth that you can even kind of trial these things on?
Sure.
I mean, any
Yeah.
upcoming?
so the changes we've discussed, you'll incorporate?
Yes, sir.
And can you circulate that to us?
Yes.
Okay.
okay,
That's
great.
Because in principle, I think that we should adopt these, and clearly, if we can make checklists where people, and tables where people can graph it out and then see it in front of them,
Sure.
they do a little bit better.
Okay, I don't know that do we need a separate form for an appeal?
Well, if it's got different criteria.
Well,
which
sure, no,
does.
like, for example, the appeal, I don't know that we need a form, but.
I created a form.
So you would
But
attach,
like, for example, take the appeal that's now pending. That's an appeal of an interpretation of some definition in the ordinance. Some other appeal might be, she measured something. She measured, she interpreted the, what do you call a map? That's one of the things. She interpreted the line between conservation and agriculture and said, and it comes right through your building site, so too bad, too sad. And they say, no, it's not here, it's right up there. And they could appeal that, and so it's a much more fluid sort of range of topics, they could be appealed.
The appeal is to the decision, so
Right.
it's,
It's
people
a-
can
it's a
attend,
ruling, right? Is that
yeah, so
basically
that
what you
people
call it?
can attend, but no one can speak because it's
I
just.
don't know about that either.
We don't
we
really
resolved
have
that
an
yet.
answer yet, do we?
Well, let me ask you a question. What do you want to do about that? Because it seems to me that in this one that's coming up, for example, it's an interpretation of what is the definition of a tourist home that has, and that's why Art opined the way he did. It's a general, it's going to apply from now on to everybody. And so there's a lot of people that are going to be affected by how we
So
design
they're
it.
not related to this.
That may not be
specific-
related
But
to
then
this
shouldn't
specific
that come
thing.
before the Board of Supervisors, or
Well, how
someplace
would
else?
it?
It's,
How would it?
Well, actually, this is an interesting point, because I have a question about that. Such a letter is generated, like what you generated, to one person. Now, if it's in their favor,
Nobody else knows.
and they never appeal, no
Nobody
one knows.
And then the 30 days runs out.
And
it's
so,
too late.
and you put on, and so the 30 days runs out, this becomes somehow binding on everybody, or just
Yeah.
on the one person?
No, it's a binding interpretation,
So-
and nobody appealed.
So it is kind of a question, because you could have these various rulings go out, and if it's in my favor, I don't tell anybody.
Mm-hmm.
you just go do it.
I just
Right.
do it, but that's,
Thanks a lot,
but that's
Michelle.
permanent, but that's permanent. But if it's against me, I appeal, and that's the only way the people who had benefited know about it,
Mm-hmm.
in a
So,
sense.
so I don't know that this,
So I don't know what the answer is, but
that,
it's kind of,
so when, if it's going to be something that's going to affect more people, then that should go in front of.
but it,
No, it
that's
doesn't.
not the
It comes to
process.
us no matter what.
I know it comes to us, but I don't think that we need to have everybody, so our ruling should be for that person in that situation, and not for the,
But
everybody.
it's not gonna be.
But it has to.
This one, it's not gonna be just for that person. It's gonna be, I mean, Michelle has, as I understand it, and you better stay out of it, because I don't wanna paint whatever, but as I understand it from what I read, she's ruled that there's no such thing, there's nothing in the ordinance about any 30 days or 29 days. If you're a commercial thing and it's a repeat thing and you're getting people and they're not living there as a full-time residence, it's still a tourist, or could still be a tourist home.
Or it could require.
And the appeal is, oh, well, that's not how some previous administrator or administrators interpreted it, supposedly. So you're somehow changing something, and I don't know, the zoning administrator doesn't change what's in the ordinance. What's in the ordinance is what's in the ordinance, and what you're saying that the board of supervisors could change it or could clarify
I mean,
it.
it should be clarified.
Well, maybe it should, but until they do, she read it, that's her conclusion. They have the burden of proof to show that she's wrong. Well, that's going to affect a lot of people until they change it, and to make an assumption that they're going to change it is always a kind of a dicey
Yeah,
assumption to make, because maybe they'll get around to it, maybe
But
they
we
won't.
don't have an answer to that question
I know we don't.
tonight.
Well, what do you want me to put in the ad? Because I'm going to get the same mess as last time. Are we going to let people talk at the meeting or not?
No. They can
Well,
come and
see, we
they,
don't have an answer on that yet. That's all.
The Attorney General, I think we ought to do it and see who shows up and let them have their say, and that way we're covered in it.
I don't, when you have a court session, you have the defendant, and the prosecutor, and the judge, jury. You
Well,
don't
what
have
does-
everybody out in
He
the
does-
audience speaking,
There
oh,
is-
I had this opinion about it, I had that.
But there is one thing, the ordinance says people may speak.
Not
No,
says they
it does
may,
not
it
say
says you
that.
you can't have an appeal unless you have
No,
a
but it
public
does
hearing.
say-
It doesn't say public hearing,
It
the
certainly
public
does.
is there,
It says may be heard.
may be heard, but does not have to be heard.
Well, I know,
May be heard,
Wait a minute,
but I don't know what
wait a
that
minute, let me
means.
get there.
Because see,
Let's
may
say-
be heard.
maybe, and according to
I mean,
Mr.
if
Klein,
appeals-
don't have to be. Don't have to
Appeals,
be.
look at 135, section
If-
170, 135.
If
It
people
says,
could stay on point,
well, that's
Which
your
would be-
job as chairman, but
which would
here's
be
what
that?
it says. Processing, decision,
To hear and decide appeals from the decision of the
Says,
zoning
oh, here,
board after notice and-
D, processing, The BZA shall process all notices of appeal in accordance with the provisions of 17140. No determination shall be made by the BZA on any appeal until a public hearing has been held on the same. And a public hearing somewhere else, there's a section on public hearings, and it says, public hearings, they have to let anybody who wants to talk.
Now, just in clarification, we have a request to the Attorney General
Yep.
on this point,
Yep,
correct?
we do.
And we don't have an answer.
Correct. As of
Okay.
today, we don't. Maybe
Now,
by
we
then.
can see if we can get an answer prior to the next meeting.
Right.
And I would propose if we cannot, we probably basically
Let's let
should
them talk
the
and then
people
we're
talk.
safe. That's what I say.
Well, what I'm saying is, we'll prompt and see if we can get that decision.
Yeah, but I have to put the ad in, like in a week or two. And now go back to 133, public
We'll say
hearings.
it's a public hearing.
Conduct of public hearings. 133A.
Okay, so
Wait a minute, let me read this.
just say
I
it's a
just-
public hearing, that's enough.
All public hearings as required shall be conducted in accordance with the following provisions. And no, not till after hearing. 2, all hearings shall be open to the public.
That's right,
Any-
open to the public.
Hey, wait a minute, next sentence. Any person may appear and testify at such hearing, either in person or by an authorized agent or agency. And that's what the
Okay,
discussion
so-
was last time. It says any person can come.
Jennifer,
come.
if we get the ruling from the Attorney General that says we do not have the public speak, then we won't have them speak. And if we don't have that ruling, which I somehow doubt we're gonna have,
I don't have
but we'll
anything.
prompt and see if we can get it, then I think we should probably have it to a
Open.
limited extent open. I mean, not talk about whatever you wanna talk about, but talk
Well, that'll
about
be
this,
your time.
this specific issue.
Right, I agree with you 100%.
So as to.
And that way, if we had too much public comment, then okay, they can't,
No,
we
I'd
can't
be-
get in any trouble
I
for
mean,
that.
Jennifer, I'd be inclined to go that route. I mean, I know it's not ideal, but,
I think it is.
well, maybe it is ideal, okay.
It's a democracy.
Okay. But that would be, and I don't know, do we need to make any sort of ruling or, finding or?
Well, I wanna make sure because I'm gonna have to put the ad in, so I wanna know what to do.
Well, it would seem to me if you put it in the ad that there will be a public hearing,
Yeah.
the way the public hearing is conducted can be dealt with at the hearing itself.
Okay, fine.
And this
Yeah,
way,
so
we
I don't
have a
think you
public
have to-
So
hearing.
just say there will be a public hearing on whatever the date is
Yes.
for next
Yes.
month, and, well, it usually says if all persons
Well, you don't have to be too inclusive.
draw nigh, he shall be heard. All right, I'll leave the draw nigh, he shall be heard on.
And just say a public hearing and then we'll,
Make up the
And
rules.
it would seem
I don't know
to
about
me, if
making
we
up
don't
rules.
get
I
a
mean,
determination from the Attorney General, we would have to go by what's in this
Okay.
ordinance.
Right.
Which is that people could then,
Right,
and then we'll just try to make sure that everybody stays on point.
you will.
At the hearing of
Yeah.
the appeal, the administrative officer shall explain the basis of the determination after the appellant has the burden of proof to rebut such presumption of correctness. By preponderance of the evidence, the board shall consider any applicable ordinances, laws, and regulations in making its decision. For purposes of this section, determination means any order and determination of it. Any appeal of the determination to the board,
State code.
as the state code, shall be in compliance with this section, notwithstanding any other provision of law. It does not say that the public can speak. They can be there to watch and observe. It does not say that they can
Well,
speak.
we've been over this before. I think
know.
you're incorrect. And
Why
I
don't
think
we-
I'm
We
correct.
don't need to debate it then.
Right.
I think we have,
So I'll just
He's
put,
just
there's a
gonna
public
put-
hearing,
that answers that
Yes.
question right
and we'll,
Is
anything
there,
else?
I think we're about done. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Is there a second?
yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Great.